So the first thing I want to jump into is just, the obvious, that there are many differences in student athletes that we coach. There are many, many differences. And when you just talk about age alone, if you're a high school coach, the difference between a 13-year-old freshman and a 17-year-old senior, there's a lot of differences. There's differences in their social development, their physical development, hormonal development. And so there's so many differences with just age alone. And then when you look at it with college coaches as well, a 18-year-old freshman versus a 22-year-old senior, there's a lot of differences. And then there's training age. How long has the student athletes been actually training in the sport? And more specifically, their history with the 400. Maybe they've done track for a while, but it's their first year doing the 400, or have they been doing the 400 for 8 years and they're a seasoned veteran? So, questions about training and philosophy. Are we trying to create a speed reserve, or are we trying to create race-specific endurance? Well, the question is also is a lot of times asked, is it going to be long to short or short to long? Speed reserve training starts with speed, usually acceleration, and then gets longer as the training goes on. And specific endurance usually starts with aerobic work, such as general runs, controlled intervals, and submaximal training. But speed reserve advocates will argue that the problem with endurance is that the 400 is a sprint. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a controversy. So where do coaches fall? You can see that on all three columns, all of these coaches have had a tremendous amount of success coaching 400-meter runners. So over time, seeing all of these coaches have success with all these different types of training really blew my mind, and it started to keep me up at night. And so early in my career, I'll be honest, I started with long to short, and it worked for some of my athletes, but not all of my athletes. And then when I started to learn about the speed reserve side of things, it sounded really intriguing. So I just completely swung the pendulum to the other side, and I started using the speed reserve side of things for 400-meter runners, and it worked for some of my athletes, but not all of them. I'm the type of coach that doesn't, count my wins and losses. So when I was using long to short and I had athletes that were succeeding, that was great. And when I was using short to long and I had athletes that were succeeding, that was great. But I also had athletes that weren't doing well. And so that was keeping me up at night. And that's not something that I want to deal with. So I did establish a toolbox of long to short. I established a toolbox of short to long. So the elephant in the room is who's right. So over the years, we talked earlier about all the differences in student athletes. We learned that there are multi-dimensional athletes, so that I needed to be a multi-dimensional coach. And I can't make the athlete fit the training. I have to learn how to make the training fit the athlete. When I was at Wheaton College, a Division III school in Norton, Massachusetts, I had 4 guys that had never broken 50 seconds in high school in the 400. And when they came in, I was looking at them when I was recruiting them, and some ran okay 200s and some were struggling in the 200, but all of them ran 50 point, and I knew I wanted them on the team. And so when I was recruiting these 4 50-point 400-meter runners, none of the other New England Division I teams recruited them. So they ended up at Wheaton College. Rightfully so. 50-point usually not going to get you to a Division I institution. But after 4 years, that relay group ran 311 in the 4x4, won the Division III National Championship, and also beat all of the Division I teams in New England. And so how did we do that? Well, I looked at the athlete and figured out what works best for each one of those athletes based on who they were. So some were more long to short, some were more short to long. So let's take a closer look at that. So we have 2 very different training models when you look at, long to short and short to long. With long to short, you're basically starting with controlled volume at the beginning of the year, which would be the bottom of the triangle, and then move towards less volume at specific endurances as the season would go on. And then the goal of long to short would be build a base of general conditioning, establish a base of capacity, work on capacity to be more specific to the 400 meters as you go on. Then the speed reserve triangle, they start with shorter speed, usually acceleration, and then as the year progresses, it gets longer and stays fast. The goal of speed reserve is to make them better accelerators get them faster, and prescribe the right amount of specific endurance. Make them stronger in and out of the weight room. And if your 400 runners become better overall athletes, they will run faster over time. In a nutshell, the 400 is a sprint, so make them better sprinters. In the fall, make them the best 60-meter runner you can. In the late fall, make them the best 200-meter runner you can. And in the winter, try to make them the best 400-meter runner you can. If you live in a state where they have the 300 indoors, that's even easier. You can 60 early on, 200, and then in the winter, you're trying to make them the best 300-meter runner you can. And then the outdoor season, you can worry about the 400. So now after years of using long to short approach, and then also using short to long and using them at the same time, I was starting to prescribe workouts based on the athlete. However, I'll be honest, I was still having sleepless nights because I had this small group of student athletes that were still not reaching their potential using these styles of training. So I asked myself, can these types of training coexist at the same time? And so what I did with these athletes is I started using, down in the lower left in the fall, starting with acceleration, short speed, and an extensive tempo, things that just don't confuse each other and both work at that time of year. And then as we progress through the year on the right side, we would progress up to max velocity and then also use intensive tempo. We just made sure there was enough rest between those types of workouts. Then as the year went on, we move up into the left, and you can see we start to move into specific and speed endurance. Then once we got to the main part of the season, the main focus would be special endurance 1 and 2 and other specific endurance for the 400. And so therefore we could try to have the long to short and short to long approach coexist together. With this method, each section prepares you for the next section. Each section builds your capacity. And remember, work capacity is defined as capacity at high intensity plus reasonable volume, not high volume with low intensity. Each section better prepares you for race distances at the highest possible speeds. So who's right? Speed reserve, long to short, or the mixed philosophy? Well, I think at this point you realize that everybody is right. All three philosophies work. All of those coaches I put up earlier that spoke at the convention all had a tremendous amount of success with 400-meter runners. So if you can't hand pick your athletes to fit the training system that you're using, have a training system that works for all athletes. That's why we preach that you should coach the athlete, not the event. You want to continue to build your toolbox, talk to people, take notes, take down their workouts, figure out things, and continue to collect and build your toolbox. But then at some point, you need to sharpen your tools as well. So in my mind, there are many types of long sprinters. To make it easier for myself, I kind of categorize them in the way that I train them into racer, pacer, and kind of the middle path or mix, as I put it there. So my observations with the different types of athlete is the mixed athlete being trained as a racer. So you have someone that's in the middle and you push them up and you want to have them train as a racer. So on the faster side of things, they get an initial spike in performance, but then they have a plateau and it's frustrating because they're working really hard but not getting better. So that addition of any type of neurological stimulus is actually going to help them run faster, but it has a shelf life to it. So it's not something that's going to last for a long period of time. A pacer training as a racer, I've noticed are usually plagued with muscle injuries because they just can't handle it. And then the racer training as a pacer is just utterly pure torture mentally for them. And then the buy-in is very low, so it just doesn't work. So here's 3 more reasons to coach the athlete, not the event. Coach the athletes that you have, not the event. We all know the event. We all know the science that goes into the event, but it affects each athlete differently. So you have to prescribe the workouts in an effective manner. If you're a high school coach, I'm going to assume on days that you do intervals, you're going to break them into groups already. But you can break them into groups based on what the workout's going to be, what's best for them. So you could have 3 groups of 10, and you're just going to time each group. One group may be doing one workout, another group a second workout, and the third group a completely different workout. And then what you do is you ask the athletes the time to rest.